Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Sean McGinty, your e-learning SIG manager for ATD Suncoast. We're going to give everybody a couple more minutes. I still have some people logging into the room, and then I will introduce Chad and turn it over to him. All right. Want to try and respect everybody's time during this lunch hour. So thank you, everyone, for joining our second eSIG event of the year. It is my pleasure to introduce Chackras Smith to do his presentation on microlearning. Chad, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate you inviting me to give this presentation, and I'm looking forward to it. My name is Chackras Smith. I'm CEO of Enterprise Pursuits. We are a analytics and instructional design firm located in Tampa, Florida. I'm an education specialist, hold an education specialist degree from the University of West Florida. I'm an instructional designer and instructional developer. So that's just a little bit about me. If anybody's live tweeting this or whatnot, you can with me on Twitter, you can do so there. You can connect with me on Facebook, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can go to my website if you want to see some of the work that I've done. I got my blog there also, or if you would have any questions, feel free to email me. So now that all the formalities are out of the way, I'm really excited to be giving this presentation because micro-learning is something that I started doing a lot of whenever I started my instructional design firm, and we started looking at how can we help salespeople out in the field learn their knowledge while they were working. And one of the challenges we had was, they're driving, they're going from store to store, they're talking to different employees. And for a company in particular, Post Family Winery, that I was working for, the company went to liquor stores, they went to restaurants, and they sold their wine products to liquor stores and restaurants. So like I said, there's a lot of movement and stuff by the employee salesman. So we started thinking, so how can we get this content to them so they can improve their skills as far as, selling wine goes? And wine is, there are so many different levels to it. When you think of it, you think of, red wines, white wines, Chardonnays, blends, and it just goes on and on and on. And you really have to be able to help these salesmen keep on top of everything that's going on in the wine industry as it goes. So the thing that I found was micro-learning was something that fit really well within that industry. It allowed us to push things out to these salesmen as they were on the road so they could look at, a video while they were on their lunch break and take 4 minutes here and there whenever they had some downtime, whenever they were waiting on a client to meet with them. They could take some time and do some of the micro-learning lessons, and they really enjoyed it. They enjoyed it a lot better than the lengthy e-learning lessons that we were doing. So we started doing a lot more of these, and it really increased our productivity. So a little bit about micro-learning before we get started. Micro-learning really is a form of content that's assessed in short bursts. It's content which is relative to the individual and repeated over time. What you're trying to do is you're trying to take something that would normally be an hour e-learning or longer, and you want to break that down into a short, accessible, chunked piece of information that they can get quickly without spending a lot of time over it. And it's something that they can go back to and look at and really delve into it. So small, complete learning experiences are really what you're looking for. You want them to be short engagements that are learning-related activities that provide a combination of content during the presentation. So you don't want to just stick with one type of content during the presentation. You want to vary it up. as you're going through. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, it's micro learning. I'm doing a video, so I have to stick with, this one type of content only. But really, we know if we vary that content as we're moving through the micro learning, the learners are going to get more information out of it. So we're looking at small units of learning that are intended for application and paired with a learning objective as a step towards the larger goal. Now, these are the way the research defines microlearning, and it's important to understand the definition of the research because the research has shown that microlearning is far better for retention than other things. So Tyler, Quinn, Thalmer, Poland, Singh, all these folks who've done these research have really found that microlearning is a lot more accessible, and it's a lot more applicable to the learner, which winds up making the learner learn the material more quickly and better. So the goal of microlearning, what we really want to do is we want to reduce cognitive load and allow learners to retain more information. So John Sweller in cognitive load theory, he says that sophisticated structures that permit us to perceive, think, and solve problems are what allow us to understand a group of facts versus trying to learn things through rote memorization. We know that rote memorization is not the best way. So Sweller says, well, what is the best way to do that? So he took these structures, these sophisticated structures, and he broke these down into what is known as schemas. And then these schemas are what permit us to learn multiple elements of a single topic. So if we're learning, biology, we can learn multiple elements of that biology course. And cognitive load theory is what helps us to ensure that we're not overloading our learners as we're providing them the material that they need, that we're trying to focus on, that the learning objective is hitting. So schemas are acquired over a lifetime of learning, and that harkens back to adult learning theory. So we know in adult learning theory that you want to tap in to your learners' past knowledge and their past understandings, and then you want to build upon that past knowledge and past understanding. And that's really one of the things we're trying to do with microlearning is build upon their past knowledge and their past understandings. And it's one of the reasons microlearning is so effective is because it really conforms to the cognitive load theory very well. And it allows learning to require a change in the schematic of structures over the long-term memory. It's demonstrated to perform from basically when you first learn it, you might be clumsy at it. Then you might be a little error prone to it. You might be slower at it, and then the difficulty smooths out, and then it becomes effortless. So once you reach effortless, that's really what you're looking for. And with microlearning, being the learner is able to go back and look at these learning topics on their own, at their own pace, they're able to really understand better the content they're trying to learn. So you want to provide easy access to the information, and that's very important that we provide easy access to the information and make sure that students are able to go and look at it when they want, how they want, because that is what really engages the learner in microlearning. And you want to keep the learner engaged as they're moving through the microlearning. You want to make sure that that the topics that you're touching on is really engaging the learners and making sure that the learners are with it while they're going through it. So you don't want to lose them at any point. And as we talked about application of prior knowledge, it enhances the student's thinking also. So it allows the student to be able to think more about the topic that they're learning because it's broken down into smaller bite-sized pieces, and they're really able to delve into it and come away with a cognitive understanding of what they're learning about. So micro-learning size is another thing that we really want to think about here. And with micro-learning size, micro-learning should never exceed 5 minutes. A lot of the research says 4 minutes. A lot of the research says 5 minutes. So I tend to go with a larger chunk of 5 minutes because that's enough time that you can pretty much get any topic in that you need to get in. If it's just a minute of micro-learning, the 30 seconds, and that's all it takes, then that's all it should take for you to push it out. You shouldn't be constrained by 5 minutes, but you should never go over 5 minutes when it comes to micro-learning. And that comes back to, George A. Miller's chunking theory. He provides the theoretical ideas that are fundamental in cognitive psychology in the processing of information. And basically what chunking says is that the capacity of short-term memory is able to hold 4 plus or minus 2. Now, when Miller first came up with it, he said 7 plus or minus 2, but that's been found to be a little bit too much. And when you look at phone numbers, you can see that's how they're broken down. 813, 479, so on and so forth. So those phone numbers are broke down into 4 plus or minus 2, and that's how the memorization of phone numbers allows. That's how you're allowed to memorize those phone numbers. Because if you just took that whole number and you tried to memorize it all at one time, you probably wouldn't be able to do it. Now with our cell phones, I know we're not memorizing phone numbers anymore, but that also refers back to, any kind of learning that the learner will be doing. So any topic, you never want to give them more than 4 plus or minus 2 of whatever that is within that topic you're trying to teach that learner. We know our working memory can hold 7 items. So I can give you 7 items and ask you to repeat that back to me, and you'll be able to repeat those 7 items back to me. However, you won't be able to hold those 7 items in your memory long term. That's why it's important to chunk it out. So, when you're chunking for micro learning, I would really suggest sticking to the 4 versus 6 or 7. And that's really going to help you ensure that whatever your topic is, the learner is getting it. Now, micro learning can be as short as you like, and it needs to deliver a desired learning objective. And that's one of the things that is important about understanding the definitions of micro learning. Is it's not micro learning if you're not achieving a learning objective. You have to be achieving a learning objective for it to be micro learning. So if you don't have a learning objective in mind, something specific that those learners are achieving as they work through micro learning, you're really just showing them a video or whatever it might be. You're really not engaging in micro learning at that point. So a single learning object or competency is all you should be focusing on in micro learning. And you can chunk that single learning object or competency out to teach them 4 plus or minus 2 things about that, but you should not be going past a single learning objective. I know in traditional e-learning courses, you might have 3 or 4 learning objectives that you want the student to learn, that they learn as they progress through. But in micro learning, you never want to go past a single learning objective or competency. The learning outcome must take place, and you're looking for a singular learning outcome. You're looking to focus your micro learning on a singular topic so that whenever they get done with the learning, they have the competency they need for that objective, and the outcome that has taken place is that they have learned that single competency or objective. You want to focus on engagement more. So you really want to keep the students engaged in micro-learning, and you want them to make sure that they are really being challenged, that you are introducing new things as they're progressing through like micro-learning that is of interest and topic to them. You know, one of the best ways to engage an adult learner is to provide them with information that's going to help them on the job. And if we are providing them with the information that's going to help them on the job, then that learner is going to be more prone to be engaged with that because it has a benefit for them. And so if you can provide them that benefit or show that benefit through your micro-learning, that is going to engage that learner more. Cut out the background content and introductions. If you have, you know, this is, you know, such and such institution, blah, 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 and you got some background that's setting up the learning, cut all that out. Cut out all the introduction material and just get right into the meat of the learning. Because with learning, you don't have time. You don't have time to go into background and context. And if they need background and context, that's something that you could either do with the prior micro-learning, or it could be something that the micro-learning is scaffolding off of, like an e-learning they took, or a presentation they took, or a lecture that they had, whatever it might be, or email they got. You want to make sure that the background content is cut out. And focus on the how-to. Focus on how to do what you're trying to do. A lot of folks miss focusing on the how-to when they do a micro-learning. They miss focusing on this is what that learner needs to be able to do when they get done with it. And they also want to give them the content of the information. But you really want to focus on how are they going to be able to utilize that content? How are they going to be able to contextualize that content versus theorize that content? So contextualization, or how the learner applies the content, is very needed. The learner needs time to digest the prior learning before moving into the next micro-learning section. So that's something to really think about, is how are they going to be able to digest that micro-learning before we're moving them to the next micro-learning section. And can the learner focus on the content and how to use the content? Will it be focused on their role, like their region, a common client, a profile, maybe their department? How do you focus that learning on the learner specifically? So make sure you're spacing out the micro-learnings. One of the beautiful things about micro-learnings is that when you're providing that to your learners, you're allowing them to go back and practice. And you want them to feel like, okay, I watched that 5-minute video. Let me go back and watch it one more time. Let me really engage in that. Focus on the usability of it. Usability is going to allow you to really focus on how the content is being used within the role of that learner. And that will allow the learner to be able to take what they've learned and apply it to what they're doing. And then, again, like I said, for personalized content just as much as possible. So, micro-learning format. You can come in a traditional lecture. You could come in, you could lecture for 5 minutes, show somebody how to do something on a blackboard or whiteboard. I know I used to do this a lot when I was in the classroom. And then after you show them how to do that for 5 minutes, you have them do it. And then you have them start working on it. So you can have it in a traditional lecture form. It doesn't have to be in an e-learning format. Video is by far the most common of all the micro-learnings that we're seeing right now. When you think about TEDx videos, those are micro-learning videos. We all watch them, and they're interested, and they're bringing us information. They're keeping us engaged. It's an excellent example of what micro-learning looks like, and it also crosses over into your traditional lecture. So TEDx videos is a great example of micro-learning. Visuals, job aids, animations are very popular right now. Audio is a really popular way to do it. Podcast, radio, different types of audio that you can deliver out to your students. Text-based, so micro-learning through emails. There are different places that do email subscriptions. I know Connie Malamed, the e-learning coach, she has a email subscription. It's really neat, where she emails you out a little bit about instructional design every day, and you read those emails. You might get it once a week, and they're short, they're quick, they're to the point, they're great micro-learning tools. And then mediums. You don't have to just one medium. Maybe you'll push out a video to the learner. Then maybe you'll send them an email that builds upon that video. Maybe you'll send them a job aid. After that, they can use while they're doing whatever the task is. So a combination of mediums can also be used for delivery, video, by far most look at Creately. They're a good place to build content maps and mind maps. Animation, of course, Powtoons is always excellent for that. One of the ones I really like, as far as podcasts go, is this. There's a great free podcast delivery system called iPatio out there, and if you just look up iPatio.com, the great thing about it is it's absolutely free. They store everything for you. They take care of all the hard work for you, send everything back to iTunes for you, and it allows you to build a company-wide podcast that can deliver micro learnings out to different departments, different areas of the company, and it's just a really good tool. Then Blogger for blogs, and of course Twitter for social media. Twitter is a great place to provide micro learning, as well as have entire micro learning sections that are built in right into the tweets. And then, when people start replying to those tweets and talking to those tweets, and then you can get a conversation going, and you can really build a social media platform around micro learning. Excuse me, sorry. So the University of Central Florida took a look at their students, and they said, how are our students using microlearning? How are they accessing microlearning here at the University of Central Florida? And they found that 99% of their students access courses from their smartphone. They also found that 33% are using Androids, while 66% of students are using iPhones. Ryan Selhammer is the director of mobile learning over there. He's the one that put this information out there, and he said that the development, he says that a development of mobile application is the pinnacle of micro learning. And I have to agree that if you can take what you're trying to teach the student and you can provide that in a micro learning format, then they can go back and easily access it because it's in an application format and they have it right there constantly. Now, I know it takes developers and so on and so forth to build a mobile application, but that is really where micro learning is going. Grasshopper is a great program that teaches JavaScript, and Sean actually told me about it, and I started using Grasshopper. And if you're looking to learn JavaScript, it's wonderful, but the other thing about it is it's great micro learning tool. It's perfect because it teaches you something very quickly in a matter of minutes, 1 to 2 minutes usually, And then it allows you to perform what you're taught, and then you move to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. It builds upon itself, and it teaches you the entire language of JavaScript as you're going through this mobile device, this mobile application. So must be accessible to your students, and it should be learner driven. And what I really mean by that is learners should be able to access they have, whether it's a tablet, whether it's an iPhone, however, whatever device they have, they should be able to access micro-learning. And they should be able to decide when to access the material and have its availability to them at all times so they can go back to a lesson at any given time. Really what you want to do with micro-learning is you want to put the learner in control of the content. You want the learner to be the one that is driving the content and driving their learning as they work through it. So, for example, if we go back to Post Family Winery that I worked for, the salesmen were excited about it because they were able to go and learn these things about the different wines. And if they were sitting waiting on a meeting and they knew that they were trying to focus on selling this customer the sangria, they could go and watch the video on sangria and have a very good understanding of it before they walked into the meeting, or maybe have a different takeaway or find something new that they haven't found before that they could, you know, talk to the client about. And the great thing about that is with that short content span, it allows you to be able to cram a little bit, honestly. It allows you to be able to take something quickly, learn it, and then go and use it. And that is one of the great things about having an accessible piece of learning with micro-learning. Now, we know micro-learning has some great benefits. We know that micro-learning engages the learner, and it drives engagement. It allows the learner to really take what they're learning and be able to use it. It fits with the demands of the workday. So what they found is there's these 4-minute to 5-minute periods of time where employees don't do anything. They're not on break, they're not at lunch, but they're not doing anything. But if you supply them with micro-learning lessons, they will often go and use those 4 to 5 minutes of time that they're decompressing or whatnot, and they'll fit some micro-learning into their schedule, and it allows them to be more effective as the workday moves forward. It fits better with the mechanics of how the human brain works. When we talked about chunking at the beginning of the lecture, and we talked about cognitive load theory, micro-learning really fits well with those because it allows you to chunk your information smaller. It allows you to provide them a smaller time period of delivery, which allows the learner not to become cognitively overloaded and allows them to retain their information better because it's chunked more properly. Anytime that you chunk information into smaller bits, it has been found that that information will be more readily memorized than if you chunk it into larger bits. So if you have something and you just chunk it into 1 or 2 bits, they're going to memorize that better than if they have 4 or 5 things. And research has proven that over and over again. So it improves business outcomes, and it allows businesses to be able to look at what do we need to teach our employees right now, and how can we deliver that to the employees right now at this time. And so what they're able to do is you say, okay, this is where we need to focus. Let's build our micro learning for that focus. And then we're going to take that micro learning that we built for that focus, and we're going to push it out to them, and so they can use that right away. And that allows our improvement of business outcomes immediately. Micro learning in millennials is important because one of the things that's been found is by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And it's also been found that millennial attention span is about 90 seconds. So you really only have about 90 seconds to engage millennials. So if you are providing micro-learning and you're re-engaging throughout those videos, you're going to be more successful with the millennial crowd than if you provide them with an hour-long learning session. So if you look over to the right, this is a quick micro-learning, and it's a GIF micro-learning. It's one of the things that I really enjoy doing is these GIF micro-learnings and pushing them out, because when we're working with some of our nonprofit organizations, we individuals who were volunteers. And to train these volunteer individuals, one of the things that we would do is we would say, okay, we're just going to shoot them a GIF. We'll text them a GIF. And once they get this GIF will show them how to, do whatever they need to do. Like this GIF here is showing you how to add an email account to your phone. But, obviously it could be more technical than that. It just depends on what you're trying to do. But it's a great way to push something out to the learner very quickly. And it's also a way that you can rethink your job aids. When you think, well, let's send this job aid out to, these individuals. Well, can that job aid be a GIF? Would that make sense to turn that into a GIF format and send them a job aid that allows them to actually see exactly what they're doing and what the steps are as they work through it? And being able to text those out is great because they're way more accessible than, other learnings that you might have, such as a video where they would need to go to YouTube and so on and so forth. You would have that right there in your text. And then you can actually go back, if you save it in your pictures on your phone, you could actually go back and look at it as many times as you want to. So it's just a really interesting way to, build upon on micro learning. And it's one of the things that we've done that's been very successful for us. So micro learning challenges. All right, there are some challenges when we start thinking about formal e-learning and formal learning. We know that the learning needs to have a learning intention. It needs to be organized. It needs to be directed, and it needs to be fixated. You want your traditional formal learning to be focused. You want it to be conscious learning, and really theoretical knowledge is what you're generally trying to put across to people whenever you're doing these formal learnings. And so by allowing your learners to be able to delve into that, you're able to help them better have an understanding of the material they're trying to learn. They're able to take that and apply that knowledge later on down the road. Well, with micro learning, that's not what you want to do. You're not looking to apply knowledge later on down the road. You're not looking for it to be theoretical and then you learn how to do it when it's time to do it. We want to teach them how to do it in micro learning. So micro learning is informal learning. It involves problem solving. You want to have a lot of things that they have to figure out. How do I get through this? Whether it might be a scenario-based learning or whatnot. You want them to be able to use some of their own skills to do problem solving. It should be on demand and unorganized. Whereas, you might push it out to them in an organized fashion, but you leave it out there and you leave it out there so they can go back and look at it how they want on their pace in an unorganized fashion. And it allows them to take control of the learning, which increases what the learner takes in because they have that self-efficiency feeling of this is my learning. I'm the one that's in control of this. I'm the one that's taking advantage of this learning. It needs to be self-paced and it needs to be self-directed. So if you need to watch something 5 times or 6 times to understand it, that should be okay. You should be able to watch it 5 or 6 times. If you feel video A is most applicable, then video D, and then going back to video C is the best way to direct that learning for yourself, then you should be able to do that when you're doing micro learning, because it's really about putting the learning in control in the learner's hands. You want the learners to be in control of the learning. So micro learning should also be holistic. Anytime you can, it should be unconscious learning. It should be learning where they don't really know that I'm going through a micro learning course. They think, well, I'm watching this video on this that's showing me something, but it's not really a learning course, and that helps learning stick a little better, honestly. And then it should be experiential learning. It should be learning that, you know, they're taking the experiences and they're using those experiences as they do their learning. So if you're converting regular learning to micro learning, there's some things you need to think about. One of the things you need to think about is aligning to the larger taxonomy or larger structure, making sure that your micro learning is aligned to the larger construct of what you're trying to teach that student. Then you want to ensure that the learning makes sense on its own. You can't just take a 1-hour learning, chop it up into 5-minute segments, and those 5-minute segments absolutely make no sense. You have to make sure that it is rebuilt in such a way that that content makes sense on its own, and it's providing the knowledge that you're trying to impart. You should keep the expected delivery time from 1 to 5 minutes. Monolithic learning might not make sense in a micro learning format. So if I'm trying to learn biology 1, it might not make sense in a micro learning format. It might be better to have larger e-learnings for large learning experiences. If I was, for instance, taking a new hire in to Post Family Winery, we would put them through the new hire e-learning development courses that we made that taught them all the different aspects of wine, and then we push out the micro learning to them and allow them to learn further from the micro learning after learning the larger content in the traditional e-learning format. So there was a medical school that took a look at micro learning, and they said, okay, how can micro learning help our students? So they took these students and they put them into Facebook groups and Instagram groups, and they said you can either do Facebook or Instagram, but you got to do one or the other. You got to sign up for it. And this medical school then started posting pictures of the different parts of the body that they were trying to teach the students. They also posted puzzles where the students would name different muscle structures or bone structures or whatever it was they were trying to learn. 91% of the students said that their learning was increased because they were able to use micro learning in that format. And then 87.5% of the students thought the delivery was properly chunked. They felt like the chunking worked well. Now, they had games that were part of this micro learning process. So my thought is the other 15% of the students who didn't feel like it was chunked properly, maybe they got hung up on a game. Maybe it took them longer to complete a game or the puzzle that they were working on. So that might be where you see the lower number there. And then you had 66% who felt that knowledge gaps were bridged by using the micro learning. So if you have 66% of your students that go to your traditional learning and they thought they had knowledge gaps, and then they move forward, they've never filled those gaps in any way. But if you're able to fill those gaps for that 66% of the students, think about how much more they're going to learn and how much more effective the learning is going to be. 50% said that peer engagement was increased. And that's one of the things we're always trying to do is say, how can we engage our peers? How can we engage others who are part of our social media group, that are part of our school, that are other students, other learners? How do we engage with them within the learning process? And 50% were able to do that. Imagine that's because they were able to comment on the things that were put up and then learn from each other's comments. And then 85% of the students use the content on a mobile device. So just as we talked about with UCF, you can see that mobile devices are huge. Whatever you put out there right now is probably going to be accessed on a mobile device to some extent, even if it's not supposed to be. So if you're able to provide mobile-friendly e-learnings to your students that are micro-learnings, that's going to help you connect some of the gaps where you might be putting content in it that students are looking at the information on a mobile device when they should be looking at it on a computer. And then 72% of the students use these micro-learnings as a study tool on their own time without being asked or probed to use it or go back and use it. Whenever they didn't have anything else to do, they sat down and supported what they've learned in the classroom with the micro-learning. Partition and engagement were higher on Instagram than Facebook, and it was so high on Instagram that the researchers asked, would it be better to use Instagram than Facebook as a micro-learning tool? And I'm sure that can be debated, and that depends on the material that you're putting out and what that looks like. But it is interesting to know that there was a much higher participation rate on Instagram than there was on Facebook. And students who utilized the micro-learning tools had a 15% increase in their average grade performance. So you can see where micro-learning actually increased these medical students' grades. So if we take a look at micro-learning by the numbers in corporate industries, 17% of learners felt like there was an increase of knowledge by using micro-learning. 94% of learning and development professionals preferred micro-learning. They preferred micro-learning because the learner prefers micro-learning. So the instructional designer said, you know, we want to provide things to the student in a way that they enjoy using it because it makes them more successful in using our products. And that's why L&D professionals prefer micro-learning. 58% found there were more engagement with micro-learning than traditional e-learning. And then learning between 3 to 6 matches matches your working memory. So not only does it help with your chunking and your cognitive processing and your long-term memory, but also your working memory. These are the resources that I've looked at over time as I've built my micro-learnings, and you know, they're there for you guys, whoever would like to look at it. You know, I think really one of the interesting things is, you know, according to Software Advice, which is one of the leading researchers in business and micro-learning software, they said that 58% of learners said they're more likely to use micro-learning than traditional learning. So that right there is one of the things that I think is super important, is that your learners are more prone or more apt to use micro-learning than traditional learning. So that's the end of my presentation. Do we have any questions that I can answer?
What are the development costs for microlearning compared to traditional learning?
Oh, that's really interesting. They found that microlearning is about 50% less costly than traditional learning. And this is because of shorter duration span of the learning and the material you're using, and you wind up using less assets within your microlearning, because what you build for your first microlearning, you typically take those assets and then you use those again in your next, and then you use them again in your next. And so it really cuts down on your asset development. And that's one of the things that I found was really interesting. If I built a asset, we'll call it John, and John walked through, the training development of how am I going to go canvas and knock doors for a nonprofit organization. And you can also take John, and then you can walk John through, well, as you're walking doors, these are the things you have to look out for. And then you can walk John through the next thing of, these are the things that you have to do when you're out there doing it. And this is how you use the tools. So you have that same asset that's going through all these different pro learnings, and it really cuts down on your traditional cost. And then the other thing that cuts down on the cost is it uses less non-essential information. So if you're cutting out, all the mess and you're getting right into the meat and potatoes, that makes it a lot quicker, a lot easier to understand, and allows you to be able to cut out some of the price costs there. And then the design and development time allows for resources to be more focused, and that right there also lowers the cost of microlearning. Are there metrics that say microlearning via audio podcast is well received or not by the learner? I have not seen metrics that have looked into audio podcasting. I can tell you from personal experience that I have used audio podcasting to a small degree to display information to workers while they were driving. So they would learn in 5-minute sections about different things while they were driving their car versus just driving over to where they were going. And we use this within the sales industry, and it was very effective for us. We were able to say, okay, here is what the sales numbers look like prior, and here's what the sales numbers look like after. Of course, that's all proprietary, so I can't give that out to you, but there was a substantial increase of about 10 to 20%.
What are the HR implications for microlearning? Because if you're paying someone by the hour and they decide to access the microlearning at home or somewhere else when they're off the clock, does that have implications for the HR department?
Well, that's a good question. Potentially, if a worker, I guess, was looking at information off the clock, there could be issues there. However, I have not run into any of those issues because they're not required to look at anything off the clock. We never would say, okay, here's this chunk of learning, make sure you look at it when you're not working. Really the idea is, how can we fit these learnings into their workday into short bursts throughout their workday, so that they don't have to do extra whenever they get home, or whenever they're doing something like driving. Can we provide them with an audio podcast where not only are they driving, but they're also learning at the same time. And that's really what you're trying to do is you're trying to fill those gaps of 4 to 5 minutes that learners take throughout the day.
I get the idea with that, and it's not that I disagree, but I would think that again, HR people and risk analysis people, and your insurance carrier for that matter, might not be thrilled at your employees who are driving around paying attention to a podcast or a micro learning when they would prefer that obviously they focus on the task of driving.
I think that comes.
Also say, in that situation, we're going to take the radios out of cars because we don't want, anybody listening to the radio as they drive, because they should only be focusing on driving. But, for me, I hadn't had any issues with that.
No, and this is Sean. Sorry, Chad. This is a question that I have some experience in. It comes down to the comfort level your HR and your risk analysis people have with it, and it's all in how you roll it out. If in the call center industry, and I got a lot of friends from my days at AOL that are still in call centers and they're still offshoring and outsourcing work. And micro learning's been huge for them because the way the billing is structured is you get paid based on butts and seats in quarter-hour increments. So if you don't have to pull an entire team off the floor to go through a 1 hour training because you're pushing out micro learning that's 1.5 minutes or 3 minutes, they can do that in between calls, and it doesn't reduce their uptime, and if everyone chooses to do it at night, that's their personal choice. As the employer, you've rolled it out, you've given them access, you've given them the opportunity to do it during their work hours. And it's just like if someone decides to read a book about work at home on their own time, they can't bill you for it. It was their own personal decision. And if somebody comes to HR and they make that argument that I'd like to be paid for 4 hours of time that I spent at home doing training, then the reverse of that is we gave you the time to do it here. What sort of time management problems do you have that you weren't able to get accomplished here? And then it becomes a coaching opportunity, at least in the instances where that's been a problem in the industries that I've worked in. That's where we're seeing, that's where I've seen it and seen how it's handled.
Yeah, I asked because I was the learning manager at a law firm, and this
been there.
Came up, and they came to a different conclusion, but it was in Alabama, not Florida. So, maybe here.
I spent 11 years as senior learning and development engineer for a national law firm, and when we decided to make the switch from 1 hour trainings to 30-minute trainings and a drip campaign and rolling out full-on performance support and just-in-time training, we had the conversation with our HR folks, and then our head of HR came from the construction industry. So he had a much different take than people who had been in legal for 20 years. He said, do they have access at their desks? Yes. How much downtime do they have in their given day? It varies. Are they billing clients hourly? Not the hourly employees, with the exception of, paralegals. And they said, if they decide to do it at home, that's their personal decision. If we're giving them the access and the equipment and the time to do professional development here at the office, then they can't come back on us, whether it was in our LA office or whether it was in our New York office or whether it was in a Florida office. And it worked really well for us. We rolled out 1,800 e-learning modules in the span of 5 years, and no one ever complained that, one, they didn't know how to use something, or, well, tons of people complained about that, but it wasn't for the lack of information. The folks that took the e-learning loved it, specifically because we kept it less than 5 minutes.
Exactly. And I think if you really look and you look at your employees and you start to chart what they're doing throughout the day and so on and so forth, you can find those chunks of time that you could recommend the learner takes a second or two to do an e-learning, or you can send it to them in the email format. And so as they're at work and they're working through their email, that's when they're accessing that e-learning and they're going through it. So it allows, the nice thing about having those small chunks of learning is it allows you to be able to send it to them in a non-traditional way that allows them to take the learning when they get it and quickly, without having to do it between this hour and this hour for this amount of time, or you got to have the mandatory 5-hour training done for your company, and you got to have it done by next Wednesday, and I just got to block off 5 hours, and there's and I have to do that while I'm working. So that's the trick with micro learning, is pushing it out there to them, and hopefully they're looking at it right away and they're going through that micro learning experience right away. Well, I have to jump off here. I have a meeting at 12:30, but it was a pleasure. I really appreciate it, Sean. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate everybody that came. Thank you, guys. If you guys have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I will be happy to help you guys out with building micro learning or whatever you guys need. Reach out to me. I'm here for you.
Thank you so much, Chad. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Everyone, I know some folks are jumping off. I just wanted to make, wrap things up a little bit. If you've got a presentation that you'd like to give to our chapter membership, if there's a topic that you're interested in, please reach out to me. You can, find me on LinkedIn. You can email eSIG at ATD Suncoast. .com or no .org, or you can reach me at my email address here at Power Design, which is smcginty@powerdesigninc.us. There's more ways to reach me than I probably am aware of. But by all means, please reach out, suggest topics. If you want to present, I would love to have more members of our chapter share their knowledge and help all of us develop. Additionally, I just posted it to LinkedIn while we were in the webinar. Our call for presenters for Ascend is live and up on our chapter's website. It closes at the end of March. So if you want to present at Ascend, or somebody who you think would be an awesome presenter, please share the link, and it'll give us the opportunity to sit down and hopefully come through tons of qualified and amazing presentations to pick for Ascend this year. If no one has any more questions, I will let everyone get back to their work days. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.